She came west looking for her father, but the desert had other plans. When an Apache warrior takes her after a brutal ambush, Sarah finds herself at the heart of a story no one back east would believe. Who is she, really? And how far will destiny take her from the world she once knew? Thank you so much for watching, and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Arizona Territory, 1876. The sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape. Sarah Bennett pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, despite the sweltering heat. The stagecoach rattled beneath her, each bump and jolt a reminder of how far she'd traveled from Boston, and how much farther she still had to go. "First time out west, miss?" The elderly gentleman across from her smiled kindly, his weathered face creased with lines that spoke of years under the harsh desert sun. "Yes," Sarah replied, attempting to return his smile despite her exhaustion. "I'm heading to Fort Apache. My father, he's stationed there." She fingered the worn letter in her pocket, the paper thin from countless readings. Colonel William Bennett, her father, had finally sent for her after 3 years of separation. Following her mother's death, he'd left her with relatives in Boston while he took his command at the frontier outpost. Now, at 19, she was finally joining him. "Fort Apache?" The man's bushy eyebrows shot up. "Dangerous territory, miss. Apache raids have been increasing these past months." "I'm aware of the risks," Sarah said, though in truth she wasn't sure she fully comprehended what awaited her. The stories she'd heard of the Apache warriors filled Eastern newspapers with tales of savagery and bloodshed. The stagecoach driver's voice called down, interrupting her thoughts. 10 minutes to Watson's Station. Last stop before Fort Apache tomorrow." Sarah peered out the window at the dusty trading post that appeared on the horizon. Watson Station was little more than a collection of wooden buildings, a lone outpost of civilization in the vast wilderness. As the stagecoach rolled to a stop, Sarah gathered her belongings, one trunk containing everything she'd brought from her former life. The station owner, a burly man with a thick mustache, helped her down. "You'll be staying the night, miss? We've got rooms upstairs." "Yes, thank you," Sarah replied, reaching for her purse to pay for lodging. That evening, as she sat in the small dining room eating a simple meal of beans and cornbread, the door burst open. A group of cavalry soldiers entered, their blue uniforms dusty from the trail. Among them was a tall man with streaks of gray in his dark hair and a stern expression that softened when his eyes fell on Sarah. "Father," she exclaimed, rising from her seat. Colonel Bennett crossed the room in long strides, embracing his daughter awkwardly. "Sarah, you've grown so much." "It's been 3 years," she reminded him gently. "Yes, well," he cleared his throat. "There's been a change of plans. Apache warriors have been spotted near the trail to Fort Apache. We're escorting all civilians back to the fort tonight. It's not safe to wait until morning." Sarah's heart raced with both fear and excitement. "Tonight? But no arguments. We leave in 1 hour." As she hastily repacked her belongings, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous awaited her. The West was already proving more unpredictable than she'd imagined. The night journey was tense and silent. Colonel Bennett rode alongside the wagon that carried Sarah and 2 other travelers, a missionary and his wife. The soldiers remained vigilant, rifles at the ready. "Keep your eyes open, men," the colonel ordered. "Scouts reported Apache movement in these hills." Sarah watched the moonlit landscape pass by, the strange silhouettes of cacti and rock formations creating an alien world, unlike anything she'd known in Boston. She wondered about the Apache. Were they truly the savages depicted in Eastern newspapers, or was there more to understand about them? Little did she know that from the shadows of a nearby ridge, dark eyes were watching the procession with equal curiosity and purpose. Eyes that belonged to a young Apache warrior named Taze, whose path would soon cross with hers in ways neither could imagine. As the night deepened and the wagon continued its journey through the treacherous terrain, Sarah felt a strange sensation, as if fate itself was pulling her toward an unknown destiny in this wild, untamed land. The attack came at dawn. One moment, the wagon train was making its way through a narrow canyon. The next, war cries echoed off the stone walls as Apache warriors descended upon them from the ridges above. "Take cover!" Colonel Bennett shouted, drawing his pistol. "Protect the civilians!" Sarah ducked down in the wagon as gunfire erupted around her. The missionary's wife clutched her arm, her face pale with terror. Through the canvas covering, Sarah could see the blue uniformed soldiers falling one by one as arrows and bullets found their marks. "Sarah!" Her father appeared at the wagon's edge. "Run for those rocks, now!" Without hesitation, she leapt from the wagon, her heart pounding in her chest as she sprinted toward the boulder formation her father had indicated. A warrior appeared in her path, his face painted for war, his eyes fierce beneath the streaks of red and black. Before she could scream, the butt of a rifle struck him from behind, and her father pulled her forward. "Keep moving," he urged, firing his pistol at another approaching warrior. They reached the rocks, and Colonel Bennett pushed Sarah into a narrow crevice. "Stay here. No matter what happens, don't move until our reinforcements arrive from the fort." "Father, no." "That's an order, Sarah." His expression softened momentarily. "I've lost too much time with you already. I won't lose you completely." With those words, he turned and rushed back into the fray, his pistol blazing. Sarah pressed herself against the cool stone, tears streaming down her face as she watched the battle unfold. The soldiers fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered. One by one, they fell. Her father made it halfway back to the main group when an arrow found its mark, piercing his shoulder. He staggered but continued fighting. A second arrow struck his leg. As he fell to one knee, a warrior approached, taller than the others, with a single eagle feather in his hair. The colonel raised his pistol, but it clicked empty. The warrior raised his tomahawk. Sarah bit back a scream as her father collapsed. The battle was over quickly after that. The surviving soldiers were taken prisoner, the wagons ransacked. The missionary and his wife were nowhere to be seen. For hours, Sarah remained hidden in the rocks, trembling with grief and fear. As the sun climbed higher, the Apache gathered their spoils and prepared to leave. The tall warrior with the eagle feather seemed to be giving orders to the others. Something in his bearing suggested authority. Perhaps he was a chief or war leader. Just as the Apache began to depart, the warrior paused, his head tilting slightly as if listening. To Sarah's horror, he turned and looked directly at her hiding place. Had she made a sound? Had her pale dress caught the sunlight? He approached slowly, his movements deliberate, like a mountain lion stalking its prey. Sarah pressed herself deeper into the crevice, but there was nowhere to go. When his shadow fell across her, she looked up into eyes that were not filled with hatred or bloodlust, but rather a calm assessment. "Please," she whispered, though she doubted he understood English. "I'm not who you think I am." The warrior regarded her for a long moment, then reached down and grasped her arm, pulling her to her feet. His grip was firm but not painful. "Taze," he said, touching his chest. Then he pointed to her, waiting. Understanding dawned. He wanted her name. "Sarah," she replied, her voice barely audible. Taze nodded once, then called out to his companions in his native tongue. Two other warriors approached, eyeing Sarah with curiosity. A rapid conversation followed, with occasional gestures toward her in the direction of the fort. Fear gripped Sarah as she realized her fate was being decided. Were they going to kill her? Take her prisoner? Her father had told her stories of white captives among the tribes, some adopted into families, others treated as slaves. Finally, Taze turned back to her and motioned for her to follow. When she hesitated, he spoke a single word in heavily accented English. "Come." Left with no choice, Sarah followed him to where the horses waited. With surprising gentleness, he helped her onto a paint horse, then mounted behind her. As they rode away from the ambush site, Sarah cast one last glance at the place where her father had fallen. No bodies remained. The Apache had taken their dead and disappeared the soldiers' bodies as well, a final insult to their enemies. The warrior band traveled swiftly through terrain that seemed impassable, narrow trails winding through canyons, across streams, and up steep inclines. Sarah lost all sense of direction as the hours passed. The only constant was Taze's presence behind her, his arms on either side as he held the reins. By nightfall, they reached what appeared to be a temporary camp, several hide shelters erected in a protected valley. Women and children emerged to greet the returning warriors, their initial excitement fading to curious stares when they spotted Sarah. Taze dismounted and helped Sarah down from the horse. An elderly woman approached, her face deeply lined, her dark eyes sharp as she examined the captive. She spoke to Taze, who responded respectfully. "Grandmother," he said in English, gesturing to the old woman. Then to Sarah, "You stay." The old woman took Sarah's arm and led her to one of the shelters. Inside, she offered Sarah a bowl of stew and a skin of water. The simple kindness brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She had expected cruelty, not compassion. As she sat eating the unfamiliar food, Sarah realized that everything she thought she knew about the Apache, everything the newspapers and dime novels had taught her, was being challenged by her experience. These were not mindless savages, but people with their own customs and codes. Outside the shelter, she could hear Taze's voice as he spoke with other warriors. Though she couldn't understand the words, the tone suggested disagreement. Was he defending her presence or arguing for her death? Whatever her fate, Sarah knew that her life had irrevocably changed. The proper Boston society girl was gone. In her place sat a captive in a strange land, surrounded by people she had been taught to fear, dependent on the protection of a warrior who had likely helped kill her father. As darkness fell over the camp, Sarah curled up on the buffalo robe the old woman had provided, too exhausted for tears. Tomorrow would bring whatever it would bring. For tonight, at least, she was alive. Days turned into weeks as Sarah adjusted to life among the Apache. Taze's grandmother, whom she learned was called Nasha, had taken her under her protection. The old woman seemed determined to teach Sarah their ways, gesturing and speaking slowly until Sarah began to understand basic words and phrases in the Apache language. "Wash," Nasha would say, showing Sarah how to scrub clothing in the stream. "Cook," as she demonstrated how to prepare traditional foods. "Sew," as she guided Sarah's hands in repairing torn garments. Throughout this time, Sarah saw little of Taze. He and several warriors often left the camp for days at a time, returning with game or, occasionally, items clearly taken from white settlements. Sarah tried not to think about where these things came from or who might have died for them. One morning, as Sarah was helping Nasha prepare breakfast, Taze approached. He spoke briefly to his grandmother, then turned to Sarah. "Come," he said, the same command he'd given the day he'd captured her. Nasha nodded encouragingly, so Sarah followed him to the edge of the camp. He pointed to 2 horses saddled and waiting. "We go," he said. When she hesitated, he added, "Not far. Return sun high." Sarah glanced back at Nasha, who made shoeing motions with her hands. Taking a deep breath, she allowed Taze to help her onto one of the horses. Her riding skills had improved during her time with the tribe, though she still felt unsteady without a proper saddle. They rode in silence for nearly an hour, climbing steadily into the mountains. The June heat was oppressive even in the early morning, but as they gained elevation, a cooling breeze offered some relief. Finally, they reached a plateau overlooking a vast expanse of desert and mountains. Taze dismounted and tied both horses to a scrubby pine. He motioned for Sarah to sit on a flat rock, then settled beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "My grandmother says you learn good," he said, his English halting but comprehensible. "She says you have strong spirit." "Thank you," Sarah replied, surprised by the compliment. "She is kind to teach me." Taze nodded. "Nasha was wife to great chief, my grandfather. She knows much." They sat in silence for a moment, the vastness of the landscape before them somehow making conversation seem small and unnecessary. Finally, Sarah gathered her courage to ask the question that had haunted her for weeks. "My father, the soldier, is he dead?" Taze looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Yes, he fought with courage. He died with honor." Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes despite her efforts to remain composed. She had suspected this truth, but hearing it confirmed reopened the wound of loss. "Why did you take me?" she asked. "Why not kill me too?" Taze was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and measured. 6 moons passed, soldiers came to Apache camp while warriors hunted. They killed women, children, elders. His fists clenched at the memory. My sister, her baby, my cousins, all dead. White man calls this war. I call this murder. Sarah felt a chill despite the warm sun. She had heard nothing of such an attack in her father's letters. "I am sorry," she whispered, knowing the words were inadequate. "I wanted to hate all white eyes," Taze continued, "to make them feel our pain. But Nasha says hate poisons the heart. When I found you, I saw fear, not evil. I remembered my sister. He looked directly at Sarah. Sometimes Great Spirit puts enemies together to make new path. The philosophical depth of his statement stunned her. This man, whom she had been taught to view as a savage, possessed a wisdom that many Boston intellectuals would envy. The soldiers at the fort, Sarah said hesitantly. They will be looking for me. Yes, Taze agreed. Soon we move camp again. Go deeper into mountains where bluecoats cannot follow. And I go with you? It wasn't really a question. Where else could she go? You stay with us until it is safe, until you learn our ways. Then you choose. Sarah frowned. Choose what? To stay or to return to your people. The idea that she might be given a choice had never occurred to her. She had assumed she was a prisoner for life, or until she could escape. Why would you let me go? I could tell the soldiers where to find you. Taze smiled slightly. By then, we would be elsewhere. Apache do not stay in one place long. Besides, you would not betray those who have become your family. Family. The word resonated strangely in Sarah's mind. Could she truly come to see these people, the very ones who had killed her father, as family? As if reading her thoughts, Taze continued. Your father was soldier. He chose path of war. You are not soldier. You can choose different path. They sat in contemplative silence as the sun climbed higher in the sky. A red-tailed hawk circled overhead, its cry echoing across the valley below. Sarah realized that she felt more at peace in this moment, with this supposed enemy, than she had in the drawing rooms of Boston. I want to understand your people, she said finally. Will you teach me? Taze nodded, a look of approval crossing his features. I will teach you Apache ways. You will teach me English words. Together we learn. As they mounted their horses to return to camp, Sarah felt a shift within herself. The girl who had stepped off the stagecoach at Watson's Station seemed to belong to another lifetime. Here, in this harsh but beautiful land, with these proud and complex people, she was becoming someone new. Back at camp, life continued its routine, but subtle changes marked Sarah's position in the tribe. Women who had previously ignored her now offered small gestures of inclusion, a nod, an extra portion of food, an invitation to join in daily tasks. Children who had once stared and whispered now approached her with curious questions, which she attempted to answer in their language, much to their amusement. And Taze, though still often absent with hunting and scouting parties, began spending evenings by the communal fire, patiently explaining Apache customs and beliefs to Sarah while she, in turn, told him about the world she had left behind. Your cities sound like ant nests, he remarked one night, after she described Boston's crowded streets. Too many people, too close together. It has its own kind of beauty, Sarah defended, though she found herself struggling to recall exactly what had seemed so wonderful about city life. Beauty is here, Taze replied, gesturing to the star-filled sky above them. In mountains, in desert, in places where man is small and world is big. Sarah couldn't argue with that. The natural splendor surrounding them daily surpassed anything she had known in the East. As summer deepened, the tribe prepared to move to their traditional hunting grounds for the fall season. Sarah, now adept at breaking down and setting up camp, worked alongside the other women, her sunburned skin and calloused hands evidence of her adaptation. The night before their departure, Nasha presented Sarah with a gift, a dress of soft deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork and dyed porcupine quills. For you, the old woman said in Apache, no more white woman clothes. Sarah accepted the gift with proper gratitude, understanding its significance. She was being offered a place in the tribe, a new identity. Part of her embraced this acceptance eagerly, while another part whispered reminders of who she had been, Colonel Bennett's daughter, a proper Eastern lady, a woman with prospects and position in white society. That night, as she lay awake listening to the sounds of the sleeping camp, Sarah wondered which path she would ultimately choose when the time came, and whether by then there would truly be any choice at all. The aspens had turned golden, and the nights grown crisp when the first snow dusted the high country. The Apache winter camp was established in a sheltered valley, with sturdy wickiups replacing the temporary shelters of summer. Sarah, now comfortable in her adopted role, helped the women prepare for the cold months ahead, preserving meat, gathering and storing nuts and berries, and crafting warmer clothing. Her understanding of the Apache language had progressed to near fluency, and with it came a deeper appreciation for their culture. The stories told around the evening fires, tales of creation, of heroes and tricksters, of the people's history, fascinated her. She found herself eagerly awaiting each night's gathering, where knowledge was passed down through oral tradition. Taze, now a constant presence in her life, seemed to take pride in her adaptation. Their initial teacher-student relationship had evolved into something more complex, a friendship built on mutual respect and growing affection. They were rarely alone together, as Apache custom dictated strict propriety between unmarried men and women, but their conversations by the communal fire had become the highlight of Sarah's days. One clear December morning, Sarah was collecting firewood at the edge of camp when she heard horses approaching. Looking up, she saw Taze and 3 other warriors returning from a hunting expedition. Their expressions were grim. "What is it?" she asked as Taze dismounted. "Bluecoats," he replied tersely. "Many. Building winter camp in valley below. They search for Apache." A chill that had nothing to do with the winter air ran through Sarah. "Are they looking for me?" "Perhaps, or perhaps they hunt all Apache. It does not matter. They are too close." The camp burst into activity as warriors prepared defenses and women gathered essentials in case quick evacuation became necessary. Sarah helped where she could, her mind racing. After months with the tribe, she had almost forgotten that there was another world, a world where she was Sarah Bennett, daughter of Colonel William Bennett, a white woman among her own kind. That evening, the tribal council gathered to discuss their options. Though women were not typically included in such meetings, Nasha insisted that Sarah attend. "She knows bluecoat ways," the old woman argued. "She may have wisdom to offer." Reluctantly, the elders agreed. Sarah sat beside Nasha, listening as various warriors proposed plans, some advocating immediate attack, others suggesting retreat deeper into the mountains. When it was Taze's turn to speak, he surprised everyone. "I will go to Bluecoat Camp," he announced. "I will take White Sister with me." Murmurs of shock and protest filled the lodge. Sarah herself stared at him in disbelief. "Hear me," Taze continued, raising his hand for silence. "Sarah is daughter of Soldier Chief. Bluecoats will listen to her. She will tell them we have treated her with honor, that we seek no war. She will ask them to leave these mountains. And if they take her and still come for us?" An elder questioned. "Then we fight," Taze said simply. "But first we try path of peace." All eyes turned to Sarah. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized what Taze was asking. He was trusting her not only with his life but with the lives of the entire tribe, the people who had become her family. "I will go," she said in Apache, her voice stronger than she felt. "I will speak for the people." The decision made, preparations began immediately. Sarah would ride to the cavalry camp the next morning, accompanied by Taze and 2 other warriors, who would remain at a safe distance. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah sat by the dying embers of the fire. Taze joined her, his face solemn in the fading light. "You are afraid," he observed. "Yes," she admitted. "What if they don't listen to me? What if they think I've been corrupted by living among you?" Taze considered this. "You speak with honest heart. Truth has its own power. And what if—" Sarah hesitated, finally voicing the fear that had been growing inside her. "What if they won't let me return?" "To Apache camp?" Taze looked surprised. "You wish to return?" "Of course I do," Sarah said, realizing as she spoke that it was true. "This is my home now. You are—" She struggled to find the right words. "You and Nasha and the others are my family." Something shifted in Taze's expression, a softening, a vulnerability she had never seen before. "When I found you hiding in rocks," he said quietly, "I thought Great Spirit had sent me enemy to test my heart. Now I see he sent me friend to heal it." The tenderness in his voice made Sarah's breath catch. For a moment, they sat in silence, the unspoken growing between them like a living thing. "If Bluecoats keep you," Taze finally said, "I will come for you. This I promise." Dawn broke clear and cold. Sarah dressed carefully in the deerskin dress Nasha had given her, but covered it with her old, tattered Boston clothing, a symbolic bridge between her 2 worlds. The old woman helped her braid her hair, now grown long and sun-streaked. "Be strong," Nasha told her. "Remember who you are now, not just who you were before." The journey to the cavalry camp took most of the morning. As they neared, Taze and Sarah continued alone, the other warriors melting into the landscape to watch from a distance. When the military encampment came into view, with its neat rows of tents and American flags snapping in the winter wind, Sarah felt a strange disconnect, as if she were viewing a scene from someone else's life. "Ready?" Taze asked, reining his horse to a stop on the ridge overlooking the camp. Sarah nodded, though her stomach churned with anxiety. "Wait here. If I'm not back by sunset, I will wait as long as needed," he assured her. With a deep breath, Sarah urged her horse forward, down the slope toward the sentry posts. She had gone perhaps 50 yards when a shout went up from the camp. Soldiers scrambled for their rifles, and a mounted patrol rode out to intercept her. "Halt!" called the patrol leader, raising his hand. Sarah stopped, her heart racing. "I am Sarah Bennett," she called back, "daughter of Colonel William Bennett. I've been living with the Apache." The soldiers exchanged disbelieving glances. The leader approached cautiously, his hand on his pistol. As he drew closer, recognition dawned on his face. "Miss Bennett? My God, we thought you were dead." Within minutes, Sarah found herself escorted into the camp, surrounded by curious and suspicious faces. She was taken directly to the commander's tent, where a stern-faced major rose from his desk in shock. "Miss Bennett, this is extraordinary. We've had search parties looking for you for months. I've been with the Apache," Sarah explained, her voice steady despite her nerves. "They took me captive after the attack on our wagon train, but they've treated me with kindness and respect." The major's expression hardened. "Kindness from those savages, Miss Bennett, if you've been coerced or threatened." "No," Sarah interrupted firmly. "That's why I've come. To tell you that the Apache in these mountains want peace. They only fight to protect their homes and families, just as you would. They're murderers," the major replied coldly. "They've killed dozens of settlers and soldiers, including your own father." "Yes," Sarah acknowledged, the pain of that loss still sharp. "There has been wrong on both sides, but continuing this cycle of violence serves no one." For over an hour, Sarah pleaded the Apache case, drawing on everything she had learned about their culture and history. Some officers listened with grudging interest, while others dismissed her words as the delusions of a traumatized captive. "She's suffering from the captivity syndrome," one captain muttered. "Stockholm syndrome, the Swedes call it. She's been brainwashed." "I assure you I am of sound mind," Sarah countered, "and I'm here of my own free will. In fact," she took a deep breath, "I wish to return to the Apache camp." This announcement was met with outright refusal. "Absolutely not," the major declared. "You're the daughter of one of our most respected officers. Your place is with your own people." "The Apache are my people now," Sarah insisted, though she could see her words falling on deaf ears. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Sarah grew increasingly anxious. Taze would be waiting, wondering if she had betrayed him. A young lieutenant approached her as she stood gazing out the tent flap. "Miss Bennett, I served under your father. He was a good man, fair, even to the Indians. He wouldn't want this conflict any more than you do." Hope flickered in Sarah's heart. "Will you help me convince the major?" The lieutenant hesitated. "I can try, but you should know, reinforcements are coming. The regiment plans to launch a campaign against the Apache as soon as the additional troops arrive." Sarah's blood ran cold. "When?" 3 days, maybe 4. That night, as she lay on a cot in the medical tent, Sarah made her decision. She couldn't allow the people who had become her family to be slaughtered. Somehow she had to warn them, or better yet, convince the cavalry to pursue peace instead of war. The next morning she requested another meeting with the major, this time bringing the sympathetic lieutenant with her. "Major Adams," she began, "I understand you believe you're protecting me by keeping me here. But I'm asking you, soldier to soldier as my father would, to consider a different approach. I'm listening, Miss Bennett. Let me return to the Apache camp as your emissary. I can arrange a meeting between you and their leaders. Neutral ground, terms agreeable to both sides." The major stroked his mustache thoughtfully. And why would I trust the word of Apache? Because they trust mine, Sarah replied simply. And I give you my word that no harm will come to you or your men during this parley. After hours of debate, with the lieutenant's support, the major reluctantly agreed to Sarah's proposal. She would return to the Apache camp with an offer of peace talks, scheduled for the following day at noon. As Sarah rode out of the cavalry camp, escorted to the perimeter by the lieutenant, relief flooded through her. When they reached the boundary, the officer extended his hand. "Good luck, Miss Bennett. I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I," Sarah replied, shaking his hand. Then she turned her horse and rode toward the ridge where she had left Taze the day before. He was there just as he promised, his face breaking into a rare smile as she approached. "You returned." "I told you I would," she said, sliding from her horse to stand before him. "But we must hurry. There's much to prepare." The peace council took place on neutral ground, a meadow equidistant from both camps. The military contingent arrived first, a small group of officers led by Major Adams. The Apache delegation appeared shortly after, led by the tribal elders with Taze serving as interpreter. Sarah stood between the groups, bridging two worlds that had seemed irreconcilable just days before. The negotiations were tense, with centuries of mistrust not easily overcome. But slowly, common ground emerged. The cavalry would withdraw from the immediate territory, establishing their winter quarters further south. The Apache would limit their movements to agreed-upon hunting grounds. A system for addressing grievances would be established to prevent future bloodshed. As the council concluded, and the two parties prepared to return to their respective camps, Major Adams approached Sarah. "Your father would be proud, Miss Bennett. He always said diplomacy was preferable to bullets." He hesitated. "You know you can still return with us. Your life in the East could be restored." Sarah looked past him to where Taze waited with the other Apache. "Thank you, Major, but my place is with them now. Perhaps someday I can serve as a bridge between our peoples. But to do that, I need to fully understand both sides." The Major nodded reluctantly. "Very well, but remember you will always have a place among your own kind, should you change your mind." "I won't forget," Sarah promised. As the cavalry rode south and the Apache returned to their winter camp, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun with terror and loss had led her to understanding and purpose. She had lost one family, but gained another. That evening, as the tribe celebrated the peaceful resolution, Nasha approached Sarah with a special gift, a necklace of turquoise and silver that had belonged to her mother. "For daughter of my heart," the old woman said, placing it around Sarah's neck, "you have brought honor to our people." Later, as the celebrations continued, Taze found Sarah sitting apart, contemplating the stars. "You could have stayed with Bluecoats," he said, settling beside her. "Returned to life of white woman." "That life doesn't exist anymore," Sarah replied. "I'm not who I was when I arrived in this territory. I'm not who the soldiers think I am, or even who my father would want me to be." Taze's hand found hers in the darkness. "Who are you, then?" Sarah turned to him, seeing in his eyes the future she had chosen. A life of challenges and discoveries, of bridging two worlds that had once seemed incompatible. "I am Sarah of the Apache," she said, "and this is where I belong." As the winter stars wheeled overhead and the celebration fires burned low, Sarah knew that her journey was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, prejudices to overcome, conflicts to resolve, a lifetime of walking between two cultures.